The measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, MMR, is one of the most widely given vaccines in the world. But for a quarter century, there's been a hidden debate.
It wasn't something that was just casually discussed. It was a sky is falling level event.
This week, an inside whistleblower's account of a company in crisis over a best-selling vaccine and worries that it might not be working.
Okay.
So, to be clear, falsifying documents.
Oh, absolutely. 100, like in the laziest way ever.
When a Marine veteran subdued and killed a man he saw as threatening on a New York City subway, he was charged with murder. He was also called a vigilante and a hero.
And I'm afraid. I'm being honest. I'm really afraid.
This week, we look at 3 cases and causes that have driven New York commuters to take the law and safety into their own hands.
And a look at the dangers of another commute. For those who fly helicopters far to sea to get to offshore oil platforms. We'll show you some special training that's a mandatory part of going to work.
Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. We begin today with an incredible story that spans 25 years so far. It involves the MMR vaccine against measles, mumps, and rubella given to most American babies in 2 doses. Yet you probably never heard about this controversy. It's brought to us by a scientist named Stephen Krahling, who worked on a project at Merck called Protocol 7 and was uniquely positioned to blow the whistle on what he learned. In the bigger sense, his account raises questions about what can go on unknown to most of us about products injected into nearly all children. Stephen Krahling was a published cancer researcher when vaccine maker Merck brought him on board as a virologist in 1999. That's when he says he found himself embroiled in an all-hands-on-deck corporate emergency.
So when I showed up to start work at Merck, they were dealing with a potential product recall, and it wasn't something that was just casually discussed. It was a sky is falling level event.
The crisis surrounded Merck's blockbuster-selling MMR vaccine against measles, mumps, and rubella, and worries that it might be defective.
It was the end of the world for them. I mean, can you imagine if they have to recall that? They have to go to the millions of parents whose kids got out-of-specification vaccine, let them know. They have to take the MMR vaccine off the shelves, and they didn't have a solution, so they would have had to stop selling it, stop distributing it.
To understand Krahling's part in this scandal, it helps to know something about how the vaccine is designed to work.
So the MMR vaccine is one of the vaccines that contains live virus. Not all vaccines do, but this functions, if I'm stating it correctly, with some live virus in it that triggers an immune response or whatnot.
Yeah, all 3 viruses are live viruses.
And there's a limit on both ends of how much has to be in there, but no more than whatever for it to be safe and effective.
Yeah, and it's that upper limit, the maximum amount of virus, live virus that might be in it, has to be safe. And the lowest amount has to be efficacious. But within those parameters is where the product has to fall. So you can't have a lower amount of live virus, and you can't have a higher amount of live virus.
Though MMR was widely given in the 1970s, the 1980s saw measles, mumps, and rubella outbreaks among many vaccinated children and young adults. For example, in 1985, 69 measles cases at an Illinois high school with a 99.7% vaccination rate. Ultimately, the CDC recommended all children get a second dose of MMR. But the tricky part for Merck came in the mid-90s, when the FDA began a review of vaccines and found the potency of MMR wore off as it sat on shelves. So the FDA instructed Merck to start putting more virus into the vaccine up front. That's called overfilling, so it would stay potent for its 2-year shelf life. Merck started doing that in early 2000 and told us it's still doing that today.
So the problem was that these viruses degrade over time, and Merck had to calculate backwards and say, we need to add more virus so that this stuff doesn't degrade, because the FDA was adamant. You cannot keep distributing that vaccine if it's out of specification. They had to do this thing called an overfill, which is the same as if you take a glass of water and pour a lot into it till it overfills. They added more virus, vaccine virus, to the vaccine for measles, mumps, and rubella.
So that when it degraded over time on the shelf, it would still meet the lowest threshold it had to meet?
Exactly.
But what if someone got that vaccine 1 week into it being on the shelf before it degraded?
They're getting a very high amount of vaccine virus.
If there's too much live virus in a shot, what are the sorts of problems that could occur? That's a potential safety risk?
Of course.
Internal documents suggest Merck was concerned that its vaccine was only potent for a year, according to court documents, but didn't tell the FDA. The FDA also slapped Merck with warnings for failing to report that it had put 23 million doses of MMR vaccine on the market that might not be potent when given. Merck risked losing its license to make the shots and future government contracts worth billions of dollars. But even with the overfilling, Krahling says the mumps virus was still dying off too fast. So Merck launched a key study known as Protocol 7. It aimed to show that the MMR vaccine still worked even with less mumps virus, so Merck wouldn't have to recall those millions of doses already out there.
They had to prove that the lower amount of virus that people may have been getting or their children may have been getting, they had to try to prove that was effective.
Yeah.
Krahling was assigned to Protocol 7, but he says no matter what he and his fellow Merck scientists tried, they just couldn't make the vaccine with less mumps virus stand up to FDA standards. The big shocker came when Krahling says a Merck lab official started telling them to change the data to make it look better.
He says whenever you find this stuff, you have to cross them out and write in new numbers.
So wait, you haven't, so to be clear, falsifying documents.
Oh, absolutely. 100, like in the laziest way ever. I mean, just crossing it out. I mean, come on, who can get on board with that? So I was like, I'm not doing that. It wasn't so much just like some rogue whistleblower or two. It was a mutiny. There were 6 of us, and they just wouldn't do it. And if the boss came around and made them change data, like 2 of these interns from Villanova, they would just go and copy their original accounts and just hand them to me and say, he changed our data, here's the original copy. I'm like, all right, so we're collecting this.
Who reported this to the FDA?
It was me.
In 2001, Krahling notified the FDA that data was being destroyed and Merck was instituting a policy to fraudulently make the MMR vaccine look more effective. He was surprised when he heard nothing back from the FDA for weeks. While he was waiting, he got a meeting with a high-ranking Merck official who didn't yet know he'd already contacted the FDA once.
I mean, I told him I was going to call the FDA unless he could tell me what was going on here. I said, I want a scientific reason for what's going on. And he just said, it's a business decision. It's none of your concern. I was like, all right. And then when I left, the human resources guy was right outside the door telling me, you're going to jail. If you call the FDA, you're going to go to jail. And then the next day when I come in, the lab director got there early, and he was just taking all these viral plates, which the FDA should have the right to see, and he was just autoclaving them, destroying them. They're just destroying evidence. And then I'm like, all right, I got to call the FDA. Immediately call the FDA. Told them, get your effing asses in here, do your effing job.
As a result of Krahling's calls, the FDA did conduct an inspection. It confirmed that Merck's spreadsheets used to determine questionable results and retesting had not been validated, and raw data was being changed with no justification. To Krahling's surprise, none of that seemed to shake the FDA's confidence in Merck's ability to tell the truth about its vaccines. But he'd sealed his fate. He was removed from Protocol 7 and soon resigned. In 2010, Krahling and another former Merck scientist filed a whistleblower lawsuit against Merck. They alleged the company misled the CDC, the largest purchaser of vaccines, and defrauded taxpayers by omitting, concealing, and misrepresenting material information regarding its mumps vaccines. Dr. David Kessler, who headed up the FDA under Presidents Clinton and George W. Bush, served as an expert witness in support of the case against Merck. In 800 pages of testimony, Kessler repeatedly stated Merck and its MMR vaccine label had been misleading and the vaccine was adulterated, and he raised the question of whether MMR's lack of potency is to blame for mumps outbreaks among vaccinated people. The case took 14 long years and finally concluded last year. In the end, the court dismissed the case, stating CDC knew about allegations of fraud and potency, but bought the vaccine anyway, so there had been no fraud committed on taxpayers. Merck's misrepresentations as to potency and its Protocol 7 testing did not impact the CDC's decision to buy MMR vaccines, said the court. CDC was aware through its own studies that the vaccine proved less effective in the real world than in the clinical trials, yet CDC continued to purchase and recommend it. Therefore, government and taxpayers weren't defrauded. Merck wouldn't agree to an interview or answer questions, but told us Merck was transparent with FDA and acted appropriately at all times. Merck's MMR vaccine was appropriately labeled. Merck has disputed and continues to dispute the plaintiff's claims. And Merck worked with the FDA to assure that all of FDA's concerns had been addressed. Most significantly, Merck raised the potency of the MMR vaccine such that the potency was assured to be met throughout the shelf life. Meantime, mumps outbreaks have continued. For example, in 2020, the CDC said the vast majority of those infected in a 6-state outbreak were fully vaccinated. This raises concerns about waning immunity from childhood mumps immunization, concluded one analysis. Fortunately, mumps is typically mild, CDC says, and resolves within 2 weeks. Rare complications include deafness or encephalitis, a potentially fatal inflammation of the brain. Those are also, by the way, potential complications from the MMR vaccine. Today, Krahling says there's no way for parents or even doctors to know exactly how much live virus is really in Merck's MMR vaccine at the time it's given.
And so if you want informed consent, what should you be allowed to know? You should be allowed to know what's in it, how much is in it, and that those amounts and ingredients have been tested in a clinical trial and shown to be safe and effective. And for this one vaccine, nobody can say that's true. Maybe it's the greatest vaccine ever made. Maybe it's perfectly safe and effective. But if I ask you how much is in it and you can't tell me, that's a problem. I think it's a problem.
Merck says the MMR2 vaccine has been available for more than 50 years, and the importance of its place in public health can be seen with the decrease in the incidence of these childhood diseases. For more on this story, listen to my podcast, Full Measure, After Hours. Ahead on Full Measure, when cops aren't there, vigilantes stepping in. By most accounts, America has suffered through terrible spikes in crime in recent years. A notorious focal point is New York City subways. Statistically, subway crime is said to be lessening now, but violent crime remains stubbornly higher than before the COVID shutdowns, and it's clear that many riders remain fearful. Lisa Fletcher has the fascinating history of people on New York's subway system who took threats into their own hands.
New York's subway is the backbone of the city, essential to its daily flow.
The next stop is Avenue Key.
With millions of riders, more than 600 miles of track, and nearly 500 stations, it stands as the largest and busiest subway system in North America.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
But after a recent wave of random attacks on riders, New York City residents are on edge. On New Year's Eve, the man in the blue hooded jacket shoved a passenger onto the tracks just moments before the train entered the station. Prior to that, a subway car became a crime scene after a homeless woman sleeping inside of it was set on fire. An illegal immigrant is accused of igniting the blaze and fanning the flames before watching her burn to death from a bench on the station platform. And countless slashings, stabbings, and shootings have plagued the city in numbers not seen in recent history.
And I'm afraid. I'm being honest. I'm really afraid.
One thing these crimes have in common, aside from their horrifying nature, is that they occurred in the absence of police. Right now, New York City is operating with the smallest force since 1994. In May last year, Marine veteran Daniel Penny was on the subway when a man, according to passengers, began threatening riders. Penny restrained him.
I forget what stop it was at, but some guy came in, he's like, whipped his jacket off, and he's like, I'm gonna kill everybody, I can go to prison forever, I don't care, I don't do this. At that point, I looked to the person next to me like, hey, just hang on to this phone for me. I had my headphones in, took it off, and just kind of like grabbed him from behind, because he came in, just to because he was acting like a lunatic, like a crazy person.
Jordan Neely, a homeless man with a history of mental illness and drug use, died. Penny faced charges of second-degree manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. His trial showcased the city's divide over what some called vigilantism. In December, after a 2-week trial, the jury found him not guilty.
In another major development, chaos erupted both inside and outside a New York City courthouse today after a jury found Marine veteran Daniel Penny not guilty.
Daniel Penny's story is not the first time a man accused of being a vigilante took action when faced with danger on the subway.
Good evening. It is Christmas Eve in New York, and the talk of the town is not peace on earth, but the violence among us, this time in the subways, where a vigilante and his gun brought terror this past weekend.
40 years before Daniel Penny, Bernard Goetz was arrested after opening fire in a New York City subway on a group of young men he claimed were trying to rob him and beat him up. He became known as the subway vigilante.
And if you think that is so terrible, I just wish anyone could have been there in my place. If you don't know better, you just don't know New York.
Goetz was charged with attempted murder, assault, reckless endangerment, and several firearms offenses. He was found not guilty, except for one count of carrying an unlicensed firearm. Retired NYPD officer Peter Panuccio was a rookie when Goetz shot the men on the subway.
There was fear. There was fear no matter where you lived in the city. Is my car going to be broken into? Is my house going to be burglarized? Am I going to get mugged on the subway?
40 years later, the sense of fear is back in New York City.
Bernie Goetz was a hero. That's how people viewed him. With Penny, he had overwhelming support of the rank and file New Yorker.
And if it was me and I had to defend myself, I would have done exactly the same thing. And I think we've gotten to a point where it's not safe to be here.
But even before Penny and Goetz, there were the guardian angels. In the late 1970s, crime and drugs were rampant in New York City. A group of volunteers took it on themselves to begin patrol. Curtis Sliwa is the founder.
When I started Guardian Angels in 1979 in the Bronx, it was the era of gangs. So a gang would come in, they put a sawed-off shotgun to your knee. They tell everybody, hold up. I mean, they stole everything. They were like locusts to a cornfield. That was organized. Very rarely would you run across an emotionally disturbed person. Now there's nothing organized. The most frightening place for a person in New York City to be is on a moving subway train when the doors are closed and all of a sudden somebody's acting up and you realize this could lead to your demise. You say to yourself, what am I going to do?
On the night train bound for Manhattan, Sliwa reflected on the decades of danger that he and his team of guardian angels see every night. Different threats, same outcome.
There were 2,000 murders a year, 10,000 unsolved shootings back in 1990. So that gives you a 30-year period. There's nowhere near that many shootings or that many murders. It's just now you have these random violent attacks, unexpected, by emotionally disturbed persons that people were frightened of.
40 years and 3 salient examples of what some call vigilantism, with little seemingly changed on New York subways.
So at the time we left Coney Island, the Guardian Angels look out at every stop. We haven't seen one cop. So it just goes to show you, the moment you get in the subway train, people know they're on their own.
For Full Measure, I'm Lisa Fletcher in New York.
Coming up, Scott Thuman and the Full Measure crew go through some heart-pounding, worst-case scenario survival training. We recently took you via helicopter to an oil rig 140 miles out into the Gulf of America to report on the energy industry on the move. Today, we thought you might like to see a bit of the worst-case scenario survival training the rig workers have to pass, and so did Scott Thuman and our Full Measure crew.
For hundreds of workers harnessing America's offshore energy, the commute to work is a little different, and not for the faint of heart. So before this 90-minute helicopter ride to see a new Chevron platform called Anchor in the renamed Gulf of America, we had to first prove, like all who go here, that in a worst-case scenario like a crash, we could survive.
The terminology we use when we get into the water is meant for you water to drive it.
At a unique school called Rely on New Tech near Houston, Texas, they teach us using this imposing simulator.
Brace.
What to do if our helicopter crashes in the Gulf and, due to the weight of the rotor, flips. Unusual but not unheard of.
Stand by for this. Rapid capsize. Brace for impact. Brace.
In just seconds, the cabin fills. We take a breath, knock out a window, unbuckle our seatbelts, and swim free.
Brace.
Oh, and then do it all over again multiple times, upside down. It's all disorienting, if not also a bit daunting. With repetition, though, comes confidence and eventually some calm amidst all that rushing water. And at the end of the day, we leave with new skills that we hope we never have to use. For Full Measure, I'm Scott Thuman in Houston, Texas.
Ooh, that'll make you claustrophobic. After a break, what's ahead next week on Full Measure? Coming up next week on Full Measure, we walk what were once dangerous streets in a dangerous country. We're in El Salvador, where the president put the military on patrol and turned the most dangerous country in the world to one of the safest. What kind of difference has that made, that the military has a stepped-up role?
Now we have freedom to walk all along our own neighborhood. The commerce has increased, so we are free.
Turning mean streets back into main streets, and how it might work in America as well. On the next Full Measure. Until then, thanks for watching.